Hilchos Issurei Biah Perek Esrim, the laws of forbidden relationships, chapter 20. Today is the final chapter dealing with the Kohanim. And we're not dealing today with any specific prohibition on the Kohanim, rather with the status of the Kohanim themselves. On the screen, we have two names for Kohanim. One is called a Kohen Miyuchas. That means a Kohen with established pedigree. We know that he's a Kohen going back for generations, at least till the temple times. The second one is called Kohen Chazaka, a Kohen whose status is presumed. That's by default. Kohanim today, a guy comes to Shul and says, I'm a Kohen. He's only a Kohen Chazaka. He's only a Kohen that we have to presume he's a Kohen because either he said so, or we've seen the last few generations, his father and his grandfather, get called to the Torah as a Kohen. But they don't have the same level as a Kohen Miyuchas. And the practical differences are what we're going to be seeing in today's chapter. And of course, it directly relates to the laws of marriage of a Kohen. Because, if a Kohen is only presumed to be a Kohen versus if he's an established Kohen, that could make a difference on who he's allowed to or not allowed to marry. So the Rambam begins and tells us the following basic rule. Halacha Aleph, Kol Koyanim Bizman Hazeh, B'chazaka Him Koyanim. All Kohanim nowadays, in the present era, are only considered Kohanim because of a presumption. In other words, we don't have anybody that can draw a book, all the way up to a Kohen, and he knows that this is the guy, his great-great-grandfather, who served in the Beit HaMikdash. They're all considered to be presumed Kohanim. And therefore, they can only partake of sacrificial foods that could be eaten in all of Israel. In the 7th book of the Rambam, we're going to learn that there are different categories of sacrificial foods. Some can only be eaten in the temple. Some can only be eaten in Yerushalayim. And some can be eaten in all of Israel. Like Truma, some of the Trumas, Challah, the first shearings. No, that has to be, sacrifice. Actual sacrifices are much only in the temple or in Jerusalem. But like the Kohen gets the first shearings. You shear your sheep, you give it to the Kohen. Certain fields go to the Kohanim. Those could be eaten in all of Israel. Kohanim today can partake of those stuff as well. For hu shetiyeh truma shel divrei. Provided, when it comes to truma, provided it's rabbinic truma. Also, in the 7th book of the Rambam, we're going to see some truma is biblically mandated, other truma is only rabbinically mandated. So today, they can only eat rabbinically mandated truma. Avol truma shel Torah v'chala shel Torah, but biblically mandated gifts, tithes, like truma taken biblically, or challah taken biblically. It's another discussion also in the 7th book of the Rambam. Today, most of the challah which we take, you have women that make a dough and they take challah and they take a portion and burn it. That's rabbinic, not biblical. Biblical challah, ein oichel oisa ela kohen miyuchas. The only person who has the rights to eat it, partake of it, is a kohen who has established pedigree. Now, what's considered to be established? Says the Rambam Malacha Beis Ezahu kohen miyuchas. What's considered to be a kohen with an established pedigree? Kol shehi idulei shnei edim shehu kohen ben pleini akohen upleini ben pleini akohen. You have to have two witnesses who can testify that you are a kohen, son of so-and-so the Kohen, son of so-and-so the Kohen, ad ish she'ein tzarich bedika, until they can reach a person in the lineage who requires no further investigation, v'hu ha-kohen sheshimesh al gabe ha-mizbeach, which is a Kohen who served on the altar. Once we reach the temple times, and we know there was a Kohen who served in the Beit HaMikdash, no further investigation is needed. Why? She'ilu lo badku beis din hagadol acharav. Because were it not for the fact that in his time, the high court wouldn't have investigated about him, they wouldn't let him serve. The high court only let Kohanim with established lineage serve in the temple. So if you can trace your lineage today back to a Kohen who served on the altar, you are guaranteed to have an established pedigree. Lefichach, therefore, we have a rule, we do not check from the altar and up. Incidentally, we also don't check from the Sanhedrin and up. That means if we know somebody served as a judge on the Sanhedrin, they are considered to be people of established pedigree. She'ein memanin b'Sanhedrin ela koyanim leviim v'Yisraelim miyuchasim. It was a well-known principle that nobody was appointed to the court. You couldn't get onto the bench unless you were a Kohen, a Levite, or an Israelite with established pedigree. So for a Kohen, if a Kohen served on the court, that would mean that he's an established Kohen. He can eat all the biblical things. He can, all that stuff. Even a Levite and an Israelite, it mattered to be established because those were the families who Kohanim would allow their kids to marry into. They wouldn't just marry into any family because a convert is forbidden to a Kohen. people like that. So the Kohenim would also only marry into established families, which could be established by the virtue of being in the Sanhedrin. Halacha Gimel Chala Bizman Hazeh Va'afilu Beretz Yisrael. You should know that nowadays the obligation to separate challah from dough, even in Israel, Eina Shel Torah, is not biblical, even though it's originally described in the Torah as a biblical commandment which relates only to Israel. Today, even in Israel, it's not biblical. Shenemar, because it says, and this is a very interesting expression in the Torah you don't find very often. Usually, mitzvahs that begin in Israel, the Torah says kitavo, when you'll come to Israel. But here it says, Shenemar bevoyachem el haaretz, when you come to Israel. The unusual language implies, bias kulchem v'loi bias miktaschem. All of you have to come to Israel in order to have this mitzvah be biblical, not part of you. So indeed, when the Jews first went to Israel, after the 40-year journey in the desert, everybody was there. So challah applied biblically. But in the second round, after the Jews were exiled to Babylonia, after the first temple destruction, when they came back up with Ezra the scribe, not everybody came. Hence, the biblical mitzvahs in Israel lost their biblical status, challah included. Same thing with truma, the obligation to take 2% of the crops and give it to the Kohen nowadays is only rabbinic. Therefore, even Kohanim in our times, who are only presumed to be Kohanim, can eat and partake of these foods. Halacha Dalid, the question is, what else, or is there anything else that can help establish pedigree? We said before they have to actually come and testify about your family tree. What if they testify that you did customs that are only reserved for Kohanim? What if two witnesses show up and say, we saw this guy eating biblical truma? Now, biblical truma can only be eaten by a Kohen who has an established pedigree. So the Rambam says, the fact that they're testifying that they saw you eat biblical truma, even if they can't testify to your own family tree, is already enough of a testimony to consider you to be established. However, we don't elevate the pedigree status of a Kohen, not based on the fact that he did the priestly blessing. You see a Kohen in Shul, gets up to the front of the bima, and he does the Birchas Koyanim. That doesn't mean that he's an established Kohen. Nor from the fact that he read the Torah first, gets the first aliyah. The Rambam describes it as reading, because in those days, people actually would read the Torah themselves, as do today in some Sephardic communities. Whoever is called up, he actually reads. So just because you saw some guy read the Torah first, doesn't mean he's a Kohen, established Kohen. Nor from the fact that he divided up Truma in the granary. This is a grain storage house. The Kohanim would come to these storehouses and collect their Truma. Just because two witnesses came and say, we saw this guy collect Truma in the storehouse, doesn't mean he's an established Kohen. Nor on the basis of one witness alone. The only thing which establishes the pedigree of a Kohen is either two witnesses talking about his own family tree, or two witnesses saying that he ate something which could only be eaten by an established Kohen. Halacha hey, Kohen meyuchas shamar. We have an established Kohen who announces one day, B'ni zeh kohenhu. This boy, my son, is a priest. Ein ma'ilin eisel yuchsin al piv. That's not trustworthy enough. For some laws it is, with regards to marriage and other things, but to give him the established pedigree, on his own testimony of the father, we don't trust him. Ad sheyavi edim shehu b'nai, unless he can bring witnesses that it's indeed his son. If witnesses can corroborate that this is his son, and now he says, this is my son, he's also a meyuchas like me, then he's a meyuchas, then he's established. Halacha vav, kohen meyuchas sheyatza hu v'ishtay, sheyadanu shehi kshera, limdina acheres. We have a kohen who's established, he has a wife who we know is acceptable as well, and they took a vacation, extended vacation to a different country. Ubahu v'hi, they show up back in town, and now there's kids in the mix. Ubanim kruchim achareim, and there are children. Literally, it means wrapped after them. It means like they're following them as children do. The Amar, so the Kohen says, Shalom Aleichem, everybody, meet my kids. Isha sheyatzas imi hizu, ve'elu baneha. This is the same wife that I left the country with, and these are her kids. We had children together. Einei tzarich lahavi edim, lo yala isha, v'lo yala banim. He need not bring witnesses, not for the wife or for the kids. Even though in the last case we said that you have to bring witnesses that it's his son, here we know the husband and wife to be kosher. Last thing we saw, they left, they came back with children. The children are meyuchas, just like he is. Mesa ve'elu baneha, what if he only shows up with children? He left with his wife, comes back only with kids. And he says, that woman that you remember, it was kosher woman, she died, but these are her kids. We had kids together across the ocean, and now they're back. Tzarich lahavi eidim she'elu banav. So now, he has to bring witnesses that these are his kids. Right. And the commentaries say not just his kids, but really her kids. Because she's the only woman that we know that's kosher. Because even if you have an established Kohen, but he has a kid with the wrong woman, the kids lose their status. So he has to bring a proof that these are his children from her. But no need to bring witnesses that the mom was kosher, because last thing we know, she left as a kosher woman. Even though maybe, yes, across the ocean she became not kosher, could be she engaged in an forbidden relationship or whatever, but the last thing we know is that she's kosher, no need for a proof. A Kohen who is an established pedigree leaves on a vacation, on his own, single guy. Comes back, ubahu v'ishtay ubanav. Comes after 5 years, he's got a wife, he's got kids. V'amar isha zu nasasi ve'elu banai. He says, look, this is my wife, I married her, and these are her kids. So now everything is in question. Tzarich lahavi raya she'isha zu ksheira. He needs to bring a proof that the wife is kosher. We don't know anything about the woman. Prove that she's acceptable. If you can prove that she's acceptable, no need to bring the proof that these are her kids. Of course, provided that they're wrapped after her, which means they relate to her as children relate to a mother. Then you don't have to bring proof. If they don't, then you do have to bring proof about the kids as well. What if the single Kohen came back from his vacation doubly successful? Now he's got 2 wives. And he can prove that one of them has an acceptable lineage. Even if the children are small and they're wrapped after this woman about which he brought a proof, so all arrows are pointing that these are her kids, because he came with 2 wives, he needs to prove that these kids belong to this wife. Maybe they're the children of the other wife who he hasn't proven her lineage, but they're just getting wrapped up. They're relating to the other one who has the acceptable lineage for whatever reason. They like her better, or whatever it is. Doesn't mean they're her kids till he can prove it. Halacha ches bahu ubanav. Again, single Kohen. Last thing we know is that he's single. He leaves on vacation. He comes back only with children. And he says, Isha nasasi v'mesa. I married a woman overseas. We had children. These are her children, but she died. Mevi edim. He must bring proof for everything. Proof that his wife was kosher. We don't know who she was. And proof that these are her kids. And then they're good to go. They're Kohanim. Same law applies, although we're talking about Kohanim here for the context of marriage and everything. But the same context, the same law applies. Done in Yisrael meyuchas ubalevi meyuchas, to establish an Israelite's pedigree or a Levite's pedigree. Same thing. If a guy leaves single with his wife, it's always the same laws. And only then will we testify that this son of this guy, Israelite or Levite, is an established pedigree, so he can be fit for the Sanhedrin. He can be on the bench of the judges. Halacha tes ein malin mishtaris lekahuna. Another thing which doesn't help to prove the status of a Kohen is a document. We cannot elevate someone's status to kahuna based on a document. Ketzad, what would that look like? It's written in a document. Pleini kohen, lava mi pleini, v'hilvao kach v'kach. Okay, we're over here, Chaim the Kohen. Chaim the Kohen borrowed $100 from this guy, or he lent him this amount of money, and we have witnesses that are signing on it. It's a very interesting question. What do the witnesses sign when they sign a document? Are they signing to the veracity of every detail in the document, or the general loan? So the Rambam says, for lineage, we don't say that they were signing on the lineage. Based on these witnesses, we're not going to presume that this Kohen has an established pedigree. Look, it calls him a Kohen, and the witness is signed. Maybe the witnesses were only testifying about the loan. Now, when do all of these things apply with regard to lineage? That's when these acts or these customs or these statements don't establish your pedigree. But for the presumption that now he should be considered to be a Kohen with presumption, and thereby he can eat a rabbinic challah or truma, or any other sacrificial stuff that are eaten in all of Israel, Mailin min hashtares. to that, we could elevate him to that status based on a document. This will give the Kohen the right to eat anything rabbinic. Val pi eid echad, or even if one witness comes, or the other things we said before, when he goes to you see a Kohen come here on holidays, Yom Kippur, and do Birchas Kohanim, that's good enough to allow him to eat these rabbinic foods. Or if he reads the Torah first. Same thing with any Kohen who says, this is my son, he's a Kohen. Yes, we said before, it's not going to be enough to have an established lineage, but that's enough to believe him, to feed him truma, and allow him to be a presumed Kohen. No need for proofs for the kids, for the wife, it doesn't make a difference, because it's for a very low level believability. Halacha Yud Aleph. Shnayim shebo lemedina. Two people show up in a region. Each one is saying, me and my friend are both Kohanim. Even though it seems like they're in cahoots, they're trying to help each other, they are believed. Both will be presumed to be Kohanim. One witness shows up and he says, I saw this guy doing the priestly blessing. I saw him eating truma. I saw him taking a portion in the granary. Or I was in Shul. I saw him read the Torah first, and I saw a Levi come up after him. That's very important because it happens in Shul all the time. We don't have a Kohen. Who do we call up first? A regular Israelite. So you got to say, I saw him read first, and I saw a Levi read after him. We will presume him to be a Kohen based on the one witness's testimony. Same thing if the witness says, I saw this guy read the Torah second after a Kohen, he's a Levite. Same thing has to be after a Kohen, because otherwise, maybe there was no Kohen in the house, and they called a Levi first, and this is a regular Israelite second. So it has to be second after a Kohen. That's enough to presume him to be in the status of being a Levi. Halacha Yud Beis Heyid Shara Zeh Shechalakim Echa Bebezdin Truma Shehiniach Lenavi and a Kohen. Interesting scenario. A guy comes to court, and all he can testify is look, there was a guy, a Kohen, who passed away, and I saw a bunch of brothers, including this guy, dividing truma that was left by their father. They're in the court dividing truma. Is that enough to consider him to be a Kohen or not? So the Rambam says it's not enough. This testimony is not sufficient to elevate him to the status of a Kohen. Why not? He was dividing truma. Says the Rambam, Shem Achalalhu, maybe he was a Chalal. Like we learned yesterday, a desecrated child. Maybe the father had a relation with a forbidden woman, and he's simply taking the truma, v'laka chelek Yerushasei mitruma lemachra. He's taking his portion in the inheritance of truma to sell it, not planning to eat it. Doesn't mean he's a Kohen. So basically you see circumstantial testimony does not always mean what you think it means. Halacha Yud Gimel, Misha Babizman Hazeva Amar Kohenani. Somebody comes nowadays and says, I'm a Kohen. Shows up on Shabbos in Sherman Oaks. Never seen the guy before. We always do it in Shul, right? Any Kohen in the house, any guest Kohen? Guy says, I'm a Kohen. So the Rambam says, Ein Neman. According to the Rambam, he's not believed. The Ein Ma'ile Nesa LeKahuna Al Pi Atzmai. On his own testimony, we're not going to elevate him to the Kohen status. V'lo yikra b'Torah rishain, v'lo yisa es kapav. He cannot get the first aliyah. He cannot do the priestly blessing. V'lo yechal b'kadshei hagvul, nor can he eat in the sacrificial foods that are applicable in all of Israel. Ad sheyilei eid echa, till he actually has one witness. Aval oiser atzmai b'grusha v'zeina v'chalala. We take his word for all the stringencies. He cannot marry a divorcee, cannot marry a zayna, cannot marry a chalala, he cannot become ritually impure to the dead. So all the negatives will take his word for it, but the positives, no benefits. If he would then go get married or become impure in the case where he wasn't allowed to, loike, he would get lashes. Any woman who has relations with him afterwards will be a doubtful chalala because maybe she had relations with, in an improper way with a Kohen. Now, that's the Rambam's opinion. In Shulchan Aruch, the Rambam writes that today we do believe a Kohen just shows up, we take his word. Because the only problem is with regards to truma. That's the only real problem, which we don't have it nowadays anyways, biblical. So that's why today, if someone walks into your shul and says, I'm a Kohen, you can give him the first aliyah. Now, when it comes to getting married, you got to do a little more serious check and figure out exactly whether he's a Kohen or not. If the person was only speaking casually in the course of conversation, you didn't ask him, are you a Kohen? He says, yeah, I'm a Kohen. He's just talking about his life or whatever it is, and in the course of talking, he describes himself as a Kohen. Then he is believed. Ketzad, what would that look like? Give me an example of that. There was a story, a guy was talking casually, and he said, I remember that when I was a boy, and I used to ride my father's shoulders to school. I remember one day, or often, they would take me out of school, and they would remove my shirt, they would put me in the mikvah, they would say, you're going to have truma for supper tonight. That's what they would say. Any of these days, my friends would always separate themselves from me. They used to call me Yochanan, the challah eater. And on his own testimony, Rabbeinu HaKadosh, the author of the Mishnah, elevated him to the status of a Kohen. Why? Because he was just telling a story. But the story very much sounded like this guy ate truma, proper biblical truma. He went to the mikvah and everything. So that was enough to make him into a Kohen. Same thing, Neman Gadol Leimar, an adult is believed to say, Zachurani keshayisi tinaik, I remember when I was a child, and I saw that guy, I had a classmate, he used to go to the mikvah and eat truma in the night. And we would presume that this person is a Kohen based on this guy's testimony, even though in general you have to be a kosher witness. You can't rely on your memory from when you're a kid. Here you could. Misha Babizman Azeva Amar Koyenani. You have a guy comes nowadays and says, I'm a Kohen. So that Rambam said before, you have to have at least one witness corroborating your story. So here he has one witness. The one witness says, I can't testify to this guy, but I know his father was a Kohen. That's not enough to elevate him to the status of a Kohen. Maybe he's a chalal. Maybe he's an improper child. The one witness that's corroborating the story has to corroborate that he himself is a Kohen. But if the father was presumed to be a Kohen, we don't need a witness. We know this guy's father was a Kohen. Or two witnesses come and say the father is a Kohen, then two witnesses is enough. Then he presumes the status of the father, and he is a Kohen. We have a presumption that a guy's father is a Kohen. And the next thing we know, there's a rumor going around that the son is a son by an improper marriage. Son of a divorcee, son of a chalutza, a woman who underwent chalitza. The rumor is enough to cause suspicion, and we bring him down from the status of a Kohen. Comes one witness and testifies that he's a kosher Kohen. The one witness is enough to counterbalance the rumor, and we bring him back to being a Kohen. The case continues. Two witnesses now come and corroborate the rumor that he's actually an improper child. The two witnesses can override the one witness, and we bring him down from the kahuna. If a second single witness now shows up and says that he's kosher, so he combines with the first witness, we bring him back up to the kahuna because of the following logic. The second single witness combines with the first single witness. So what do we have now? We have 2 against 2. Talmud calls this trey or trey. 2 against 2. 2 are saying he's kosher, 2 are saying he's not. When 2 against 2 in the court clash, yidachu elu ve'elu, we push them both away. We don't know who to rely on. And since all we now have is a rumor, the rumor definitely gets pushed away. Shahashnayim kemeya, because the 2 who are supporting his kosherness are considered like 100, to counterbalance the rumor at least. And therefore the Kohen remains in the presumption of his father. So in the end of the day, in this case, he's not becoming a Kohen because of any witnesses, rather because of the original presumption. Halacha Yud Zayin. We have the case on the right. A woman was married to somebody. The guy ended the marriage. She was supposed to wait 3 months before marrying anybody else. She didn't. She gets married to somebody else within the 3 months. v'yolda, and she gives birth to this boy. Ve'ein yodua im ben tisha l'rishon ben shiva la'achrin. And we don't know which father he belongs to. Is this a 9-month-old pregnancy from the first marriage, or a 7-month-old pregnancy from the second marriage? One of them is a Kohen, second one is a regular Israelite. What's the kid? Kohen or an Israelite? Says the Rambam, he's in doubt whether he's a Kohen. And we'll soon see what the law is. What if you have two kids that we know who they are? This husband was a Kohen, this husband was an Israelite, there's two boys, and they get mixed up. And the mixture grows up. Each one is in doubt of being a Kohen. And therefore, what do we do with the doubtful Kohen? We place upon them the stringencies of both Israelites and Kohanim. They can only marry women who are fit for the priesthood. They cannot become ritually impure to dead people. That's like a Kohen. But they cannot eat truma like a regular Israelite. If they do marry a divorcee, we're going to force them out of the marriage, but we're not going to give them lashes because maybe they aren't Kohanim. Halacha Yudches. What if it's two Kohanim? So these two are actual both Kohanim, and their babies get mixed up. Or this case, she was married to a Kohen. The Kohen ended the marriage. She did not wait 3 months. V'nisis the Kohen acher married to another Kohen. We don't know what's this boy. 9-month-old to the first Kohen, 7-month-old to the second Kohen. For sure a Kohen. But we don't know who's the father. Says the Rambam, first of all, we give the child the stringencies of both. Which means he has to be an einin. Einin literally means deep pain, but it's a reference to the initial state of mourning. Right when a person's relative passes away, until they're buried or until the end of the first day, he's considered to be an einin. Einin is relevant to Kohanim because a Kohen cannot serve in the temple when he's an einin. So here, this guy, when either father passes away, he's considered to be an einin, he cannot serve in the temple. Same thing for the fathers. If this boy passes away, they both have to be in the state of aninus. For him, they cannot serve in the temple. By the way, as an aside, interesting question. The terminology, he is an einin for both of them, sounds like it's possible for both of them to pass away in his lifetime. The problem is, if you have a Kohen who ends a marriage, how is she allowed to marry another Kohen unless he died? Right. If he divorced her, right, then she couldn't marry another Kohen. She's a divorcee. So how does this case ever come to be where you have two live Kohanim who are both married to the same woman? So the Talmud actually said, there's two answers. The Talmud says that the first guy was never actually married. It was a doubtful consecration. She wasn't sure. She lived with him after the doubtful consecration. They had a baby, but then she got fully married to the second guy. That's one answer. The Magid Mishneh, the commentary here, he says it's talking about a case of miyun. She was a young girl, and she had a child with this man. Then she dissolved the marriage. When you dissolve the marriage, you don't have the status of divorcee, so she could have married another Kohen. Anyway, just an interesting point. Yeah. So that's the one chumrah. They both of them are causing aninus. Hu ein mitami lahem behem einan mitamin loy. He cannot become ritually impure when either of them pass away. Even though a Kohen can become ritually impure to his close relatives, he doesn't know who the father is, so he can't become impure to either of them. Neither can they become impure to him. They don't know if they're his son. He can ascend to the temple during the week of this one and that one. There were 24 different groups of Kohen families who served on a rotation in the temple. So he can go, this son can go with both families, but he cannot take a portion. Let's say they would divide the lechem hapanim, the showbread, every week between the Kohanim who served that week. He can't take a portion, and maybe it's not really his week. If both of his potential fathers were in the same week and on the same day, in the 8th book, the Rambam describes how this worked. All the Kohanim were divided into 24 families, and then each family was divided into 7 days. So, for one per day. But if both of these men were in the same day, same week, then of course, they can take a portion, but only one portion, because he's only entitled to one portion. He's only the son of one of the fathers. But when do we say this whole case of the two Kohanim? If both Kohanim were involved in a proper marriage. But if this case came out of promiscuity, Gazru chachamim shemishatkin noisei midin kahuna klal. The sages decreed that this kid loses his status of Kohen completely, even though both fathers potentially are Kohanim. He's not a Kohen. Hayil ve'enei yedea aviv havadai, since he doesn't know who his father is for certain. Shenemar, as it says, this is the verse about Pinchas when he was instated into the kahuna. What does it say? V'hoisa loy ulezarei acharov. The kahuna will be a gift to him and his children after him, which means ad sheyiyeh zarei miyuchas acharov. Only if his child can trace his lineage back to him, then you're going to be a Kohen. This kid doesn't know which father he goes after. So the sages said, no more laws of the Kohanim apply to you. Ketzad, what would that look like? Give me an example of promiscuity which creates this problem. Asara Kohanim, shepeirash echad me'amubal. You have a group of 10 Kohanim. One of them leaves the group, goes and has relations with a woman. Shari avlad kohen vadai. The kid born here is for sure a Kohen. That's not a doubt. So only Kohanim in the group. Nevertheless, since he doesn't know his father to trace his lineage back to him, we quiet him from the laws of the kahuna. He can't serve in the temple, he can't eat sacrifices, he cannot take a portion from the sacrifices. Nevertheless, if he becomes impure to dead bodies, or he marries a divorcee, then we're going to give him lashes. It's not a doubt to create permissiveness. It's a doubt only for stringency. We're not going to give you any of the rights of the Kohanim, but we are going to give you all the responsibilities and all the decrees.